Hello, everyone. My name is Tina Holland. This is First Friday Lunch. Every month, the first Friday of the month, I go ahead and I host a live stream, and this is December's live stream of 2020. Today on the schedule, I had to plan to talk about my NaNoWriMo project, my December, like writing through the holidays, which we kind of talked about last year on First Friday Lunch. Writing through grief a little bit, because for those of you that may or may not know, my mother passed away on Monday. Not totally unexpected, but a little bit of a surprise too. And actually, it seems like everyone on that side of my family passes away around holidays. It seems to be a thing. So not super surprising that she passed around so close to Christmas. She was in a nursing facility, and COVID. I think she didn't die of COVID. I'll just say that right away. She didn't die of COVID that we know of. And also, I think just being isolated in a nursing facility since this started probably really caused her to go into a downward spiral. So it would, like, as I said, it wasn't entirely unexpected given the year's events of what, is basically a shitty 2020. But anyway, we'll get back on topic here. So sorry about that. I got a little off topic. So I'm not quite as organized as I normally am on this stream, just because I don't have my little cards and all that stuff. So I will be going through stuff. Really, Mocha? That's my dog, Mocha. Mocha! I have no idea. My husband may be home, so she might be seeing them outside. So I apologize for that. Anyway, so what I was going to talk about was my NaNoWriMo project, which was I had started working on a novella. I didn't do a full nano, like the 50,000 words that you're supposed to do. I planned on doing 30,000 because I had this book, Fireproof, was republished with was republished with my publisher, Book Boutiques. And so I went ahead and I was writing a sequel to it, which was called Wind Resistant. And what I ended up doing was epically failing at Nano. Granted, there was a lot of stuff going on, not necessarily like with my mom, who ended up passing away on the 30th, but just in general, like holidays and people coming to visit. Well, not really coming to visit, but just general busyness of stuff. So, so I just didn't get it done like I was supposed to. I'm about halfway there. I think I'm at like 15,000 words or something. So my projects for December, which I tend to be kind of light in December, but I was going to pitch my Regency at PitMad, and I totally missed it because I've been doing all this memorial planning for my mother. So I missed PitMad yesterday, which I was like, son of a bitch. I really wanted to pitch this Regency. So what I'll probably do is I'm actually layering that right now, which is probably a good thing because that wasn't really ready to pitch anyway. Sometimes the universe has a way of taking care of stuff for you. So I think what I'll end up doing for November is I have this Regency that I have to finish layering. Probably not quite so immediate as finishing Wind Resistance, which I want to get through. And like I said, there's probably only another 15,000 words that I have to write for that one, just because it's just a novella. It's not going to be a full-length novel. So I see, and actually, if you guys I see there's a few people watching. If you want to go ahead and put like any questions you have about anything that I'm talking about in the comment section of YouTube, I'll see it on StreamYard, which is where I'm streaming from. So I'm going to go ahead and work. My projects for November are to finish layering this spy Regency, and I put like spy elements in it. So I'm going to finish layering that and hopefully get that up to novel length, because it's a pretty long novella at this point, but it's not quite novel length. So I think with this layering, I will probably be able to get some more stuff in there, basically. So I'm going to be working on that. I'm going to be working on Wind Resistant. And then also I have a contemporary that I've really just been struggling with. I think I started it in Camp Nano. And if you have read my Caulfield Cowboy series, it's actually it's writer's book. So actually, Amanda Noon, Catherine Noon, went ahead and asked the first question. So she says, what does layering look like for you, and what is your process? So my process is basically to go ahead and get the bones down on a book. So I will write the draft. And then I should say this is my new process, because my old process used to be that I would go ahead and I would write everything from beginning to end, because I was a pretty hardcore pantser. And now I go ahead and I'll do an outline first, and I will get the basic draft down. And sometimes that ends up being novella length. Sometimes it ends up being novel length if I'm lucky. But then I go back and I'm really bad about setting and just like where people are standing. So I'll have to go back in and layer that. I tend to write pretty heavy dialogue. And so my drafts end up looking a little more like screenplays. Like there's a lot of dialogue in there. And so I have to go back in and I'll put in tags and I'll start dressing people, because I forget to put clothes on people. I was so worried about that, actually. In The Courtesan of Constantinople, there's probably more setting and clothes on people. And wasn't my usual writing style until I went to novel length. And I remember I took it to my critique group, and Mary Jean Adams, who is a historical romance writer, is in my critique group. And she's like, what is with this obsession with clothes? Because it wasn't like something you would see in my writing before. So now there's this new, like, I'm writing with people are wearing clothes, and I'm pretty detailed about what they're wearing. Also, though, I feel like as somebody who reads historical romance, and granted that was steampunk, but I feel like people are really interested in the gadgets and things that people are wearing, the clothing. I feel like that's more, it's part of that layering process when you're writing that kind of a book. I don't know if it's as significant in contemporary, but people will argue with me. I'm sure there are some people that will argue with me about that. So I see that, hello, I see my puppy just came home. So there's that. Anyway, so that's part of my process, is to go ahead and layer in those elements so that people know so basically it extends it out and it gives the reader much more depth into what I'm working on. So that's part of it. Let's see. So that's layering. So yeah, so that's what I have to do. So I'm going to work on that. And then I'm working on this contemporary, as I said, and that's novella length as well. But it's just been a struggle too. So, and I think now with my mom passing, I'll probably do a thing on writing during grief. But for me, it's much, I should have taken their bells off. So sorry. For me, it's much more about escaping from where I'm at and keeping busy. And so since writing is now my full-time job, I will probably be pretty busy. Like, I debated whether or not I should do this live stream today, but I decided ultimately that I would, just because it'll help keep me busy, and it pulls my mind away from where I'm at right now personally. So I think we talked a little bit, it was probably a few videos ago, and I tend to, when I'm under stress, I tend to journal pretty heavy. There's something called Morning Pages that's recommended by Julia Cameron, and I've been doing a lot of that and a lot of journaling, and that always helps my process so that I can actually be creative. So that's kind of what I'll do. And actually, when I'm stressed, that's my creative outlet, is to write. So actually, my mom's passing kind of made me change this wind resistant. I've been debating killing off a character in there, and I may do it just so I have an outlet for my grief. And it may not stay in there. I might take it back out again, but I might write a scene like that just to really help get these emotions out of me, and then also put them on the page, because then I think they add realism for the reader. So I might do that. So those are kind of the projects that I'm going to work on in December. And then the other thing that I was going to talk about was, let me see here. Oh yeah. So my preliminary stats for The Courtesan of Constantinople, because I'm with a publisher, I probably won't see what went through the distributorships like Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kobo, Overdrive. Well, Overdrive's a library, but on iBooks, I probably won't see those. I was talking to the guy who basically pays me and said, I haven't seen the stats yet, because I was pretty excited to see them, because The Courtesan of Constantinople ranked number 269 in steampunk fiction, and it was in over 1 million or something like that in Amazon. So I was trying to research and figure out, okay, what does that mean in dollars? How much money did I make if my stat is that kind of high? So I was surprised that it did very well in steampunk fiction, because I was surprised, and then not really too, because for me, that's pretty high. I would bet that's probably the highest rank I've ever had in Amazon, even though it's a subgenre. It's not in there. There's like books. If you go to any book on Amazon, if you're an author, you can go out there and look at one of your books, and you'll see the ranking by books, and you'll see it's and then you'll see it broken down into the different categories that the algorithms have placed you in. If you're self-published, you probably placed yourself in those algorithms, so you can kind of see where your ranking is. And I also found a site where you can plug in the overall number of what it is, and you can see how that equates in sales. And I think when I went ahead and did that, I had like 500 book sales. Now, depending on if Amazon was running a special or something like that, I'm not sure what they'll give my publisher, and then what my cut will be of that. But because I went with a new piece with my publisher, I'll get a 60% royalty off the net. And basically what that means is whatever Amazon pays my publisher, I'll get 60% of that. So depending on how Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, iBooks breaks those numbers down, I feel like this book did pretty good. I won't have those numbers until February, so I think we'll do like a marketing talk in February, and I'll talk a little bit about what I did for this book. Some of the stuff that I can tell you that I did initially is I am right now on tour with Silver Dagger Book Tours, and I'll put that link below when we're done with this broadcast. I am on tour with them until the 22nd of December. I didn't start the tour until probably a week after my book release, which was fine, because I'm keeping, I think, the momentum of where we started with, because I think once I actually started the book tour, my numbers started dropping on Amazon. So I'm not sure that the book tour is bringing in sales like I thought. But one thing that I do think that helped bring in sales was simply putting on Facebook on my normal page that my book was out, because the sales went up pretty significantly. And that wasn't even advertising. That was just me saying, hey, my book is out. Here's the cover. Here's what it looks like. And just really generating a lot of buzz around the pre-order and the cover and the art and stuff like that. And I wasn't even doing the whole buy my book. I really just said my book is out today. And I put it on my blog. I put it on Facebook. I put it on Twitter. Actually, I set up my blog to go to Facebook and Twitter so that I don't really have to think too much about that. So I did those things. And I think that initially helped the sales, because it was a bigger push than I had done before. I'm also advertising right now on Coffee Time Romance. I'll put that link below as well, just with the book cover. And I think I have my first review coming out on Tuesday. And that was with Silver Dagger Book Tours, one of the bloggers. It's basically a blog tour. One of the bloggers is going to be reviewing the book. So fingers crossed it's a good review. Anyway, so those are the things that I'm working on for December. And I'll give you a marketing update probably in February, because I will actually have those numbers of what I did in sales. And I'm not too uncomfortable sharing those with you, because I think we've talked a lot about this book in particular, just because it's been queried for so long. You can look at the book I did last month. I mean, I've been querying this project and trying to get it sold for 4 years. But one of the things that I had said was, even though I think steampunk, and mine's more Gaslight, but there are very steampunk elements because they're kind of cousins to each other. One of the things that I think that helped is that readers that read that particular genre, and I would say mine is steampunk romance, because there's a lot more romantic elements than maybe straight up steampunk fiction has. One of the things I've noticed is that most of the people that sell at least on Barnes & Noble, because that's kind of where I ended up starting doing my research, because typically most of my readers tend to be on Barnes & Noble, but I have had a few on Amazon as well. But one of the things I've noticed is that the bestsellers are self-published. And my thought process when I went to my small publisher was that traditional publishing isn't for whatever comfortable with steampunk fiction. Like I'm thinking that what the issue is for them is that they are not seeing large sales. But if you're boutique published like I am, and I say that actually that ends up being the name of my publisher is Book Boutiques. If you're small press published like I am, then like selling 500 books is pretty significant, especially in a pool of whatever. But I think that the sales for books are in steampunk fiction, those readers are pretty voracious and they like that genre. And then for me, if you add romance in, those readers are also voracious. So you go ahead and you'll have these people that buy, read fast and read pretty significantly. I suspect the sequel will probably be out in January. The next book in the series, Alchemist of Archangel, we're working on the cover art right now, finalizing some stuff. So I've had some back and forth with my publisher on what I want it to look like. And so they've done some preliminary stuff. Like I like the background, but we're just working on the front model to make sure that that's what I want. So which is another thing I like about small presses, is because I know if I went with a traditional press, I wouldn't necessarily have this say. That's a lot of times when people look at marketing, that is where authors that are really good at marketing will probably choose self-publishing, like they have a background in it or whatever, because they feel like they can market their book better than the traditional publisher can. And usually they will go ahead and make more money. All right. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to the next question that Amanda had. Thank you, Amanda, for coming so that we have all these wonderful questions. And she asked, what's it like to switch back and forth between contemporary and historical or genres such as steampunk? How do you manage your own process? You don't put a steam engine in your contemporary books. Actually, I think, so right now, the two books that I'm going to work on for December are both fairy related. And I actually have there's a character placeholder that has a similar last name to some characters that I have in my steampunk novels. And you will see a character from my post-apocalyptic series in the second book, because usually when I'm writing, I will put placeholders in for some characters from other books. And in my books, like there's actually a character in my contemporary series. He's like an off-screen character that's in my post-apocalyptic series. And I did that intentionally, but unintentionally. I kind of put a placeholder in. And even like when I did this with the second book, I put a character in my post-apocalyptic series in the second book of the steampunk series, just as a placeholder, but he's a paranormal character. But I was like, well, I'm going to put him in there as a placeholder. If it gets traditionally published, I'll change his name. It'll just be a different name. And I kind of like doing that because I don't know how many of my readers cross genres. But I don't seem to have too much of an issue if I stay generally paranormal or generally contemporary. And that might be one of the reasons I'm struggling with this contemporary novella, which actually has no magic elements at all. And it's just been a real struggle to write. And I'm not sure why. I might end up having to go back to like some character analysis, or I might end up scrapping what I've written so far and just change it, because it's just, for whatever reason, I'm really struggling with that particular book. So those, I don't know. I guess I don't really have an issue as long as I stay either paranormal or stay either historical, because I did notice I was writing my Regency, which I don't have any placeholders for characters in that one, because I just, and not that it's, I would say not in the sense that it's super historically accurate, but you're borrowing stuff from history. And so I just didn't use any characters or there's no references. So that one's probably clean. So usually if I'm working on just something that doesn't cross over like my paranormals do, a little bit, and not a lot, but a little bit. But I suspect readers that read my steampunk series might read my fairy series, which is like Fireproof here. And then the sequel to that will be Wind Resistant. But I suspect that I might have crossover in that genre. So it's hard to say. I myself as a reader read historical. I like historical, and I like steampunk Gaslight. Those are kind of my go-to reads. I do read a few contemporary series, but I'm a little picky about those, and I don't hardly, and I'll read post-apocalyptic, but I don't hardly ever read like urban fantasy or paranormal. I will if I know the author, or if I've read something else by them and I think I might like that. But boy, they've got to have a really good hook. And I don't know why that is, that I'm not particularly drawn to them. Sometimes there's not enough, like if you're reading an urban fantasy book and it tends to have like a female, very strong female driven heroine, there might not be enough romance for me, which I kind of like. And I like that happily ever after. So, or if it's a series of books with the same character, that doesn't really draw me in. But some readers just absolutely love that. And so they're not going to maybe go over to romance or whatever. They like the romantic elements that are in the urban fantasy, but they may not cross over into it. And there have been some studies that like a writer who writes in multiple genres may not get crossover readers, and that is probably true. I mean, they might, but I feel like most authors don't. Like the odds that my steampunk readers will go over to my contemporary is probably pretty slim. They might, but I'm guessing that it might be if I have a free read available, or if there's a book on sale, they might try that, but they're probably not going to go right to it. You know, they're probably not going to read everything by Tina Holland. They might just read that genre, which may be why this book is doing pretty well versus some of the other books that I've had. And this is actually the first book that I've had out in a few years because I struggled to try and publish it. And I ended up going back to book boutiques who published my backlist when my other two publishers folded. So I gave this to them. And so this is sort of the first book I've had out, when that might be like maybe my perception of how sales have, since it's been so long, have actually changed. Maybe it's kind of average. But for me, it feels like a lot just compared to what I did before. So what's the difference between steampunk and gas lamp? Actually, it's kind of funny because there's a group called Bizman Writers Guild, and they went ahead and asked me to do kind of a class on this. So here's kind of the definition as I understood it when I was researching how to pitch this book. So steampunk is usually Victorian. It tends to be Victorian, but you could have it could be basically a historical aspect. I have seen modern day steampunks. I think Kate Locke writes a series called The Queen. What is it? The Queen is Dead. And that's modern day, but everything's pulled forward from steampunk elements, everything's hung over from the Victorian period. And so it tends to be from there, but there's steampunk elements. So that's considered steampunk. But I don't know if you like have hardcore readers, if that's like, if they're purists, if that's really steampunk. But basically it's everything with elements of the industrial era within Victorian times. So it ends up having steam powered elements when steam was new. So there's like things have very steam that basically use the technology of that age, and that's referencing the steampunk. There's this book by Beth Daniels that I read before I wrote my book called Writing Steampunk. And there's like a bunch of kind of rules. There's usually heavy sciences. And I actually put through some of those in there. Like there's a couple things in my book in Changing History. So the few things, I do have some steampunk gadgetry. I have an alternate timeline, and my alternate timeline is the Allies lost the Crimean War. So Britain, France, I'd have to look through, lost the Crimean War to the Prussians, Russians, and I can't remember the other group. So they lost that. So one of the things that I have is, and then the Civil War in the United States, Lincoln survived his assassination attempt. So, but he's in a wheelchair now. So, but that's an off-screen character. So I don't do that. Like nobody meets with Lincoln or whatever. But one of the characters that went to Constantinople, and that's also why Constantinople is named Constantinople and not Istanbul, is because of the Crimean War. So I figured that the name might not have changed. So there's some elements there. And one of the things is because the Russians originally lost the Crimean War, that was part of the reason they sold Alaska to the United States. And Alaska was known as Archangel by some in some circles. So I went ahead and I used that. So Archangel territory. So the whole series is called the Archangel Revolution. So the Russians still control Alaska, basically. So the next book takes place in Archangel. so that was kind of, so you basically change history. You have things powered by steampunk elements. And I mean, you do have like electrical stuff, but it's really early stuff. It's not super technological, but and in the second book, I do some electrical things. And so I kind of had to I might have a little thing at the end that says, readers, this didn't really happen yet, but, and then they do some, so there's steampunk elements, there's an element that's changed in history, and then there's science things. And one of the science things that I did was, I decided to let dodo birds live. but they got really, really big. They're big, and they're kind of, they're like vultures. I'm trying to think of, they basically eat carrion, or they're meat eaters, and they do sometimes attack people, and they traveled on ships with sailors. And so they're kind of like everywhere, especially around ports. There's these, they call them dirty dodos. And so that was one of the things that I had added. Now, when you get into Gaslamp has more fantasy elements, and that's the big change. So a lot of stuff that got branded as steampunk, like if you think of series like Beck McMaster's, she writes vampires and steampunk, vampires, werewolves, and that's in a steampunk rather than her series is called London Steampunk. But I would argue that it might be, well, I don't know, maybe it depends on whether or not you consider vampires and werewolves fantasy or not. I would say that Kristen Callahan's Darkest London series is very much Gaslight, because she has fairies in it. And then you also have Cindy Spencer Pape. So these are some authors that I love, and my books would be comparable to theirs in the sense that I have a lot of similar elements. So, but those basically, Gaslamp just basically has more fantasy elements, so, or more magic. There might be witches and less science. So if you think of them, like one is more fantasy, like if you have fantasy and sci-fi, steampunk is more sci-fi, Gaslamp is more fantasy. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's basically how I understood it when I went ahead and was doing research on how to pitch it. I think part of the problem when I did go to pitch it is I was like, well, mine falls more Gaslamp because I'm not super technological. But I've done a ton of research on fairies, werewolves, and vampires because I had written basically this book a long time ago. Which has fairies in it. So I think that I was more comfortable writing in that. And so then when I pitched it to agents and editors, I was pitching it as a Gaslamp, and that may have hurt me in the sense that they're like, well, I don't know what the hell that is, so we're not going to buy it. So that might have been part of it, is that wasn't really it's not a genre that they put stuff in. And when they did the algorithms, it fell into steampunk fiction, but I would argue that there's probably less steampunk and more Gaslamp elements in it but it still sells to, I think, to the same market. So, and I suspect that a lot more of the steampunk, at least the stuff that I've read and I like, there are more fantasy elements to it. One of the authors that I read that is pretty much steampunk is Anne Renwick. She writes steampunk. What is her books called? I think Spider Chronicles. I don't remember, but hers are definitely more technological. And as an author, she has a heavy science background. So I think that is one of the reasons that her books are written that way. Let's see. Oh, we're at 12:02. So actually, I'm gonna wrap it up quick. I want to check one thing here, but I think in January, I'll give more stats on what I have for the courtesan, but our next meeting, my next one, hold on, I'm going to pull up my calendar here. Let me mute this so you guys don't have to listen to that. There we go. No, that's not it. All right, what the hell? This is why you need to have actual calendars in front of you. And so once again, I apologize for not having all my crap together today, but this is sometimes what you have sudden events happen to you. This is what ends up happening. So the next Friday is the first Friday of the month, is actually New Year's Day. And I think I'll probably do that. I might actually have more viewers because people might be home because they're not working because it's New Year's Day. So New Year's Day, 11:30 right here on this channel, or I think it'll have a new link or whatever, but it'll be on my YouTube channel. So you guys can go ahead and I'll get that set up here shortly. And then, you know, come see me New Year's Day at 11:30 and I will be happy to see you guys for lunch. So 1/1/21, that's the date, Friday, 11:30, pencil me in for lunch. Also, Silver Daggers is having a book tour right now. Put that link in the comments below, and I will see you guys over there. So I will see you next month. Talk to you later. Bye.